In May 2025, Doug Wickard, a brigadier general in the U.S. Air Force, summoned a group of civilians living near Edwards Air Force Base in California to inform them that they needed to prepare for the possibility that their area could be targeted by the Chinese military if a war were to break out between China and the U.S. military over Taiwan. Wickard, who is considered one of the most experienced American pilots, told the local residents that the Chinese might strike the Aerospace Valley area near California in order to target the factories of the American company Northrop Grumman, which manufactures the advanced B-21 bombers, one of the most prominent weapons in the U.S. arsenal designed to deter China. The American pilot told the local residents that if a war breaks out with China, this is where it will happen. Wickard's statements are part of the United States' recent moves in the past months and weeks to raise its combat readiness in anticipation of a possible war with the Chinese military, which could move at any moment to forcibly annex the island of Taiwan. The Americans are currently racing against time to be militarily prepared so they can deter China from attempting to invade Taiwan, or defeat it if deterrence fails. And Chinese President Xi Jinping is determined to annex Taiwan by force. What exactly has been happening in the Indo-Pacific region in recent weeks? How is the United States preparing for war with China? And is it possible that China could surprise the Americans and attack Taiwan before they have time to organize their defenses? And why, if an American-Chinese war does break out, is it highly likely to be a long war? That's part of what we'll be chatting about together in today's episode. I am Ashraf Ibrahim on the Economic Plan Plus. Secret, no foreign national allowed. This phrase was written on most pages of a secret internal document distributed by U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in mid-March 2025 to officials and officers inside the U.S. Department of Defense. In the 9-page document, which was titled Interim National Defense Strategic Guidance, and whose contents were revealed by the Washington Post, it discussed how the Pentagon would implement the vision of U.S. President Donald Trump, which is centered on the necessity for the U.S. military to prepare for a possible war with China and to ensure victory in it. In the document, Hegseth states that China is the only threat that concerns the U.S. Department of Defense, and that preventing China from seizing Taiwan, in addition to defending U.S. territory, are the only missions required of the Pentagon. The statements of the American secretary in the leaked document are completely consistent with previous remarks he made last February to his colleagues in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, during the tour. A meeting with them in Brussels, Higgs told his NATO counterparts that the starkly clear strategic realities prevent the United States from putting Europe's security at the top of its priorities. In the coming period, we will only focus on two things. The first is the security of the American borders, and the second is China. Then he told them, right now, we have a competitor, Communist China, which possesses both the capability and the intention to threaten our homeland and our core interests in the Indo-Pacific region. And since we can't be everywhere at once, we have to choose the region we secure and maintain a presence in. In reality, we are going to give priority to deterring China. In short, the Trump administration intends, over the coming years, to allocate most of the United States' military capabilities to prepare for a possible war with China. American intelligence believes that the Chinese military is preparing itself to invade and seize it in 2027. And this is no easy task, considering that a war with China would be anything but a walk in the park for the American military, especially since there is a possibility that it could be a long war. This is according to one of the top American officers who said in an article published in May 2025 that if China attacks Taiwan and we decide to intervene, this war will most likely not end quickly. That's why the U.S. military has become highly concerned about its ammunition stockpiles, a significant portion of which was depleted during its recent engagement with the Houthis in Yemen. By the way, this was one of the main reasons that pushed the Americans to end their military operation in Yemen less than 2 months after it began, even though the original plan, according to the New York Times, was for the operation against the Houthis to last from 8 to 10 months. Trump wanted to see the results of the campaign against the Houthis within 30 days. And on the 31st day, he requested a report on the results of the campaign in its first month. The results presented to him were not satisfactory because in just the first month of this operation, the U.S. military had used up advanced munitions worth $1 billion. And this was at the same time that the Houthis retained their ability to target American ships and shoot down American aircraft, especially the MQ-9 Reaper, of which the Houthis shot down at least 7 in less than 2 months. According to the New York Times, the Houthis caused losses to the US Navy. They lost 2 of their F-18 fighter jets, which crashed into the sea. In addition to that, the Houthis almost brought down an F-16 and an F-35 stealth fighter. The latter narrowly escaped a Yemeni missile that nearly hit it. The important thing is, just days after Trump announced that he had reached an agreement with the Houthis to halt the mutual strikes between them and the US military, specifically on May 14, 2025, the Appropriations Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives held a hearing with Admiral James Kilby, the acting chief of naval operations. The Americans discussed the status of ammunition stockpiles held by the U.S. military after it halted its operations in Yemen. Republican Congressman Tom Cole, chairman of the Appropriations Committee, said that if, God forbid, we went to war with China, that war would be short because we currently do not have enough ammunition to sustain a long war. This makes you wonder, what did Admiral James Kilby say that led the Republican congressman to make such a painful statement to the American public? Kilby said, in short, that the American attacks on Yemen have created a gap in the U.S. Navy's weapons stockpiles, and that the American industrial base will have difficulty replacing what was lost in the battle with the Houthis. In the same context, the man told members of the House of Representatives that we need to increase our production of long-range precision munitions like Tomahawk missiles, as well as anti-ship missiles and heavy torpedoes. He pointed out the necessity of bringing in additional suppliers alongside the current ones. According to my dog, the new suppliers might not be able to manufacture the required munitions with the same precision or efficiency as the current suppliers. But as he put it, they will be able to produce effective or acceptable missiles. And in his words, that would be much better than having no missiles at all. The admiral told the committee verbatim, if we go to war with China, that war will be bloody, there will be human losses, and it will require a lot of munitions. That's why our ammunition stockpiles need to be full in this context. The chairman of the Armed Services Committees in both the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate revealed last April a plan to raise $150 billion to increase U.S. defense spending. More than $20 billion of that amount will be allocated to boosting American production of munitions such as long-range cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles, and air-to-ground missiles. And here, it's important to note that this $150 billion is actually being charged to the current fiscal year's budget, which is 2025. The Trump administration is planning for the Pentagon's 2026 budget to be the first in U.S. history to exceed $1 trillion. And this is remarkable considering that the Trump administration is trying to pressure all government agencies to cut their spending in order to reduce the budget deficit. But it seems these cuts do not include the Pentagon, which needs a lot of money to prepare itself for a potential war with China. In the same context, the Americans have recently agreed with the Japanese to accelerate plans for the joint development and production of missiles such as medium-range air-to-air missiles and Type 6 surface-to-air missiles. However, the preparations required for a war with China are much greater than just the issue of ammunition. In late March, the U.S. Secretary of Defense visited American forces at Andersen Air Force Base on the U.S. island of Guam, the Western Pacific Ocean. From there, Hicksett described the American soldiers stationed on the island near Taiwan and China as the spearhead of the American presence in Asia. Hickett's remarks during this visit about the importance of Guam explain statements by Pentagon officials reported by the Washington Times in which they predicted that in any potential war with China, the Chinese military will target American ports and airports in Guam with missiles at the outset of the war, aiming to eliminate the American military capabilities present there, which include strategic bombers, fighter jets, surveillance aircraft, and warships. These predictions are based on intelligence assessments of Chinese war plans. The reason the Chinese are planning to target Guam is their awareness of the information that Hicksett referred to in his statements there, which is that Guam truly is the American spearhead, whether in attacking China or in defending American territory. A large portion of America's offensive and defensive military capabilities is concentrated in Guam. The U.S. military believes its Chinese counterpart can hit it with plastic missiles and cruise missiles. In this context, Guam is considered an advanced American aircraft carrier, but one that cannot be sunk Unlike real aircraft carriers, which cannot approach China freely, the Chinese have invested heavily and over many years in what is known as anti-access area denial capabilities, which are essentially long-range missiles designed to keep American warships, especially aircraft carriers, away from their waters. This is where the importance of Guam and the aircraft station there becomes clear for the Americans, and why they are striving to fortify Guam against potential Chinese attacks. The Americans have allocated nearly $9 billion for their military projects there during the period between 2024 and 2028. $1.7 billion of that amount will be spent on building an integrated missile defense system on the island. In parallel with this, the U.S. Air Force has started to rely on a strategy called agile combat employment, which is based on the idea of dispersing American warplanes across a wide network of small airfields and not concentrating them in one place or a few locations in order to avoid the risk of losing them in a concentrated Chinese strike. Currently, military engineers are working on rebuilding and rehabilitating old airstrips in various locations in the Philippines and the Western Pacific, some of which are unused and date back to World War II. The goal is to deploy, small groups of American aircraft in different places to increase their survivability and make it more difficult for the Chinese to target them all at once. All of this increases the costs of preparations for war with China, which the Americans do not intend to bear alone. The United States is pressuring its allies in the region, specifically. Taiwan has been urged to significantly increase its defense spending. Trump and his allies have attacked the Taiwanese government multiple times for this reason and have demanded that it spend the equivalent of 10% of its GDP on preparing itself militarily for a possible Chinese invasion. Of course, this is an astronomical percentage, 4 times Taiwan's current defense spending. And in an effort to appease Washington, which had threatened to impose high tariffs on Taiwanese semiconductors, Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te expressed his willingness last February to increase Taiwan's military spending, raising it from the equivalent of 2.5% of its GDP to more than 3%. Of course, China was not pleased with this and responded a few days later by launching a series of naval exercises that involved the use of live ammunition near Taiwan's southwestern coast. China's repeated maneuvers near Taiwan and its forces' drills simulating a blockade of the island are ongoing tests of the United States' resolve to defend Taiwan. The United States is the main obstacle to China's control over Taiwan because, in addition to the United States' implicit or undeclared commitment to defend the island, Taiwan relies primarily on American weapons for its self-defense. At this point, it's important to mention Taiwan's strategy in managing this issue. The Taiwanese government is planning to allocate a special budget of 500 billion Taiwanese dollars or 16.5 billion US dollars for its military purchases from the United States. This is aimed firstly at improving its ability to defend itself and repel a Chinese attack, and secondly, to satisfy the United States and convince it not to abandon Taiwan. Unlike former US President Joe Biden, who had clearly announced the United States' commitment to defend Taiwan, the current US President Donald Trump has refused more than once to explicitly commit to defending Taiwan in the event of an attack by China. This could be a strategic ambiguity, or it could be a lack of concern for Taiwan's fate, as Trump has previously questioned the value of defending it from a purely geographical perspective, when he pointed out that this island is about 9,500 miles away from the United States, while it is separated from China by only 48 miles. The Trump administration considers China to be the biggest and most dangerous threat facing the United States, and possibly much more dangerous than the Soviet Union at the height of its power. This could support the scenario of confrontation, which will most likely be primarily caused by the issue of invading Taiwan. However, within the same administration, there are strong isolationist voices that question the value of involving the American military in a war with China over Taiwan, especially since such a war would be extremely costly, both in terms of lives and money for both the Chinese and the Americans. According to estimates by Bloomberg Economics, an American-Chinese war over Taiwan could cost the world up to $10 trillion. And this point brings me